roofing, unemployment skyrocketing, but all is well in paradise. That's the way it goes in St. Martin. On another note from the news, we have learned that the employees of Scotia Bank will be going over to the Republic Holding, the Republic Bank of Trinidad. We have spoken about this yesterday, that the only country in the Caribbean that had objections to Scotia selling out all their assets and their assets in the islands is Antigua. Antigua wanted to guarantee that, first of all, an Antigua bank has the first option to buy out Scotia Bank, and secondly, they wanted to know what will happen to their people's savings and mortgages and stuff like that before any permission is given for a sale. We learned also that the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin and the government of St. Martin were informed only Monday last, while everywhere else it was already known. We have heard nothing from the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin, which is the regulatory body. So we're wondering, as we've asked before, who's in charge in this country? Everybody comes and does as they please, and there's no protection for the people in this country, whether it be savers, insurance, policy carriers, or anything. Things just happen, and we read it in the news. We don't hear it from Parliament or the Council of Ministers. It's quite a strange way to run a country, and therefore we always ask, who's in charge here? On another note, last week they were talking about having a budget debate because the budget should be presented in December, and the UPS party had asked for postponement because, according to UPS, their faction, every budget now is being handled as an emergency meeting because the documents come in late. They're supposed to be presented in September and debated in December, but usually they're given 2 weeks, and they're against operating under this kind of pressure. Besides that, they're contending that the budget they get is not the same budget that the advisory council get, and also the elucidations are not the same thing. Besides which, the print in the budget that they get is so small, it takes them much longer to prepare for these meetings. So it has been delayed without any future date set. We hope we can get there sometime. As soon as we know when it will be, we will inform you. And today, I have some guests in the house. I have in the house Miss GWENDOLIEN MOSSEL, who is the legal advisor in the Ombudsman office. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
We also have Mr. Randolph Duggins, who's the Secretary General at the Ombudsman office. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, radio listeners.
Okay, we're going to talk some, law, where you talk Ombudsman. We know that we have just appointed or selected a new Ombudsman. The Ombudsman that we all know for such a long time is now taking a well-deserved rest. Or I know she's not going to be quiet because she stays up to date on all that happens in the country. But how are things going at the Ombudsman office?
Okay, good morning. I'll start off first before I answer your question with why the first reason we're here, just to get that out. Since 2014, we have been having the Ombudsman Bureau a open house, which is we open our doors to the public and we welcome them and see how we operate at the Bureau Ombudsman on the E.C. Richardson Street, number 13. That is the road of the police station, or the former ECC building as it is popularly known. And since 2014, we have been having open houses. So we had one in 2014, 15, 16. Unfortunately, last year we did not have one because of course, Hurricane Irma. And then this year, the office brainstormed and we decided to come up with a different concept for our so-called open house. So we came up with a project called the Best School Ombudsman Project. What we did, we approached the 4 public high schools on the island, and we informed them of the concept of the program, of the project, where we would set up, so to speak, satellite Bureau Ombudsman at the public schools. We contacted Milton Peters, Harvard Video Department, St. Martin Academy Academic, MAC, CSC, and St. Dominic High School. And they all agreed to the project, and we started around in May. We gave them we gave them trainings of what the Ombudsman office entails, and leading up to that, we also gave them different trainings. We visited the schools, the Ombudsman and Miss MOSSEL, as well as other members of the Bureau Ombudsman visited the schools to give, to encourage them to participate in the project. And the project comes to an end next week, Wednesday, December 5th. We'll be having the closure of the project, which we call the information evening, where all the schools who have participated, the school ombudsman, we have 2 or 3 representatives per each school, will give a presentation on what they have learned over the few past months. And we will be giving prizes, of course, that is open to the public. It's being held on December 5th at the USM room 202 from 7 p.m. until 9:15 p.m. As to the question of how things are going at the Bureau Ombudsman, well, we are moving along, and we, as you know, the Bureau has been in existence for about 8 years now, and it is a process. We continue to grow, continue to develop, continue to put our name out there, because even though we have been in existence for about 8 years, people still are unaware of what the Ombudsman does, which is not so strange. Our colleague bureaus in Curacao, as well as in the Netherlands, who we have a close working relationship with, have been in existence for much longer. The Ombudsman of Curacao has been at least about 15, 16 years. The Ombudsman in the Netherlands, at least more than 30 years. And you still find persons that are unfamiliar with what the Ombudsman does. So, we are growing. We continue to receive complaints. People continue come to the office to find out what we do and how we can assist. So we are moving on, gradually, but in a positive direction.
I'm very pleased to hear that you're doing something at the schools. Should some kids want to, aspire to work at the Ombudsman Bureau or become ombudsman themselves, what kind of preparation do you need? You must study law?
Well, actually, this is the same reason why we have done this project, to bring it closer to home to them, to show them that, hey, even you can be the ombudsman, because oftentimes it's like, ombudsman, what's that? And with this project, we actually brought them, give them more familiarity with government and what the ombudsman does. We started in June actually with trainings, explaining them the role of the ombudsman. They would be like a substation for the ombudsman, like a front office. And the students and the parents or teachers could come with their concerns. The trainings consisted of the role of the ombudsman, which is twofold: the investigative role and the guardian of the Constitution. We focus more on the investigation role. That is our core task. The students learned when one can file a complaint. The ombudsman investigates complaint filed against government or government agencies. And before you can file a complaint, you have to first let your concerns be known to the government. So they learn when someone comes to the window, they learn the front office. They come with their concerns, they come with their grievances, and they would have to analyze whether or not it is a valid complaint, or give information as to where to go. We explain them what government is, because in order to know that, hey, this complaint is truly against a government or a certain department or even a civil servant, you have to know who is government. So we got them familiar with the organizational structure. They know the 7 ministries, they know the minister, the secretary general, they know that there are department heads, and then the civil service. They learn the different departments. And with that, they can analyze if someone comes to complain to the about census, that they know this is General Affairs, the Ministry of General Affairs, that is responsible for that complaint. They also learn that we investigate the behavior of government. The behavior is supposed to be proper behavior. And this we do with the standards of proper conduct, which actually were derived from international standards of good government. The main standards fall under the categories of human rights, substantive propriety, procedure-wise, and also administrative accuracy. So they learn in which category, something went wrong with government. We also indeed got them familiar with what you need to study to become an ombudsman. To become the ombudsman, it has to be on an academic level, university, and you have to study law. As Secretary General, you also have to be on an academic level. You also have to study law. Then you have the investigators or complaint officers. You have a bachelor's degree in law.
Not
necessarily law.
A
Habeo.
or a bachelor degree.
Bachelor degree. And then we have the administrator that does the all-round administration at the office. And that's an MBO level.
I had the chair of Parliament here 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about the ombudsman in what she terms expanding the scope of the work of the ombudsman, because now they basically tweak the constitution and laws passed by Parliament and see if they can keep up with the constitution and stuff. And as you said, complaints that come in against government. But we were talking about the Parliament that have oversight function being able to get ministers to show up or to answer questions. Basically a political problem, but it has to do with the tres politicas, the separation of powers, and how do you get accountability if the people refuse to come. I looked at the ombudsman in South Africa, and they have that included in the duties that they can call the chair and the members of the ministers and so to order to give answers to the people. Of democracy, according to them, democracy wouldn't function. There would be no oversight function if you can't get this to happen. Is the Ombudsman Bureau in St. Martin satisfied with the expanding of these things so that would also be taken up as a role they would play?
The ombudsman as such, well, our jurisdiction or our authority goes as far as giving recommendations to government. So we do have in the law that if we send to request for information or responses to complaints, that they have the duty to adhere to it, which is Article 19 from the National Ordinance of the Ombudsman. But as to, we have recommendations, we recommend government either to change a law, to answer the person, to give a response, to set a system in place to be able to address the concerns in a better way. But we do not have that power to say they have to do what they have to do.
Let me just add to that as well. In terms of our investigations, if we are investigating a complaint against a ministry, we have certain procedures, and oftentimes, or not oftentimes, at least I would say, let me correct that, in some ministries, the responses are not forthcoming. That we would inform them, we would remind them, send 2, 3 reminders, and still no response. The ombudsman can convene a hearing where the minister or a representative of the minister has to attend. So that is in terms of our investigations. In terms of oversight from Parliament, we as the High Councils of State, so the Audit Chamber, the Council of Advice, and the Ombudsman assist Parliament in their oversight by submitting reports. So if we draft a report against a ministry and we indicate certain recommendations, which we do on certain situations. For example, for this year, we have done 3 systemic investigations where we investigate the system, how a department or entity is functioning. If we recognize there are systemic issues going there. We did one for disaster management. We did one for the dismissal advisory committee, and we recently also concluded one for the rent tribunal. And all of those reports we also submit to the responsible minister, but as well to Parliament, to complement, again, as High Councils of States, we complement them in their supervisory role. And of course, once they receive that report, they could also request a minister to come to Parliament to answer or to give account for what is mentioned in the report. But in terms of forcing them or to report to Parliament, the Ombudsman has no coercive means. We cannot force you to go to Parliament, of course. We cannot force you to follow our recommendations. So that is not a competency that we have.
No. I know you don't have it. The chairlady made that clear, but the question was, would the Bureau be satisfied with them expanding the authorities of the Ombudsman to include other things?
Well, that is a prerogative of Parliament, and once the law is changed, we will do what we will exercise the powers that the law provides for us. But I don't think we are object to any changes.
Okay, in St. Martin, the separation of powers is kind of jumbled somehow. 1 minute you hear it coming from the Justice Department, then from the ministers, from the Parliament, sometimes it's not clear who's in charge of what. One of the problems we're having here now, what is real, at least in my mind, playing negative in the press in St. Martin, is the situation at government-owned companies, NVs and other entities. We hear certain things happening, and nobody seems to be in charge. So, like the Social Economic Council, can the Ombudsman also, unrequested, do an investigation into these things?
Yes, the Ombudsman definitely can. We have that jurisdiction in the law, stating that we can do our own motion, own investigation, if we see it fit in the interest of the public. And we have done so, as he said, the 3 systemic investigations. We definitely do that. If there are complaints from people outside, and we see, hey, this is systemic, that every time is the same ministry or the same subject, we can decide to say, hey, let's look deeper into this and do a systemic investigation. Go into the root of the problem, where it is. And of course, indeed, we have the issues with the arm's length, the minister saying, hey, I cannot do anything, but then you have also the government entity that says, no, but you have to be by the minister. And then you get no answers, no results, because neither one is taking responsibility. And the Ombudsman can address the minister for their responsibility. We have a list, actually, of ZBO's, zelfstandige bestuursorgaan, the government entities with public authority. We have a list that was published in 2017, in January 2017, of which the Ombudsman assumed authority over. And based on that list, we can address government entities if there is a conflict or anything, complaints against them, or if there is a system that is not functioning correctly.
The prosecutor office in St. Martin once started an investigation into an entity here, and they said it's based on discussions they followed in Parliament and concerns among the society. Can the Ombudsman office also take that on, so they don't have to be an official complaint, but because of what's playing, you can research or investigate something?
Actually, yes, that's what we call own motion investigations, where the Ombudsman initiates the investigation without a complaint. Just to continue a little bit on what my colleague was saying in terms of investigating of government NVs, not all of them, as She mentioned we have established a list of ZBOs that the Ombudsman has assumed authority to investigate. For example, one of the companies on that list of government companies is the PJIAE, which we have initiated systemic investigation regarding their procurement policy. So that is one that we are currently engaged in. We are in the beginning stages gathering information. So to answer your question, yes, certain entities that the Ombudsman has assumed authority over, certain government-owned companies, the Ombudsman can, on her own initiative, investigate.
The investigation of the ombudsman are for information, for advice to Parliament, you said. So it's not in any way leading up to criminal reporting or criminal procedures.
No.
Persons can use our report, the final report, to go to court. Oftentimes they have done that. And the question that you asked before, if an other, like if an other agency or other, for instance, the General Audit Chamber does also an investigation on a particular matter or subject, we usually don't go and do the same, because, you know, you would let that High Council of State do their duty. It doesn't make sense to do a double investigation in that way.
One of the things that people here have been complaining about for ages, practically all of my adult life, is the so-called fuel clause at GEBE. It would seem that a service-given organization in the country is charging for everything, including the fuel they use. Prices keep going up, but the people are not getting any relief anywhere. Is that something that can be taken up by the Ombudsman? Because it's not a specific cry, it's overall. Even the business community is complaining about the fuel clause, which at times seems to be more than your actual consumption bill.
It is something that people do come on a regular basis at the Ombudsman office about GB, about tariffs, different things, customer service as well. However, we have not assumed authority over GBE, not as yet.
Okay, so that will be in some of this expansion the chair talked about that Parliament would have to do to give you that authority?
Well, there is a lot of research that has to be done before we can say that we have that as a government entity with public authority.
Okay. Now, the staffing of the Ombudsman, because I can foresee, I mean, you have a lot of work as it is already, but I can see it becoming, more cumbersome, needing more people. How is your staffing now? How do you go about recruiting?
Well, the office consists currently of 6 persons, including the Ombudsman. So you have the Ombudsman, who is the head of the bureau, who is the head of the office of the Ombudsman. You have the Secretary General, legal advisor. We have 2 complaint officers and all-around administrator. So that's the 6 persons. That is our formality, as they would call it. So in order to expand it, we would need approval from, we would need to have reasons to have to show, hey,
Yep.
because we are getting overburdened, the amount of complaints we're receiving, it is too much for the existing staff. That is something we would have to approach Parliament and get our formation changed. But while we are busy, I do not think we are at that stage yet that we require an expansion of the office.
I don't know.
We do currently have a vacancy for the legal advisor. As you know, Ms. MOSSEL will be effective January 1st, the new ombudsman, so her position will become vacant. And so we have a vacancy for a legal advisor. So those persons who are hearing the sound of my voice, of course, if they fulfill the requirements, you should apply.
Okay, well, that's good, and congrats. I forget to start with that one. Congrats anyhow.
Thank you.
No, but what I'm thinking about, I'm seeing the trend that, since Hurricane Irma, things are going so that I could foresee many more people knocking at your door, coming up and wanting an investigation and especially in your investigation ring, you might need to expand because it's not going to get better anytime soon. And this reconstruction is stretched out over a period of about 7 years till 2025. So therefore, the question, do you see and how do you recruit going forward?
Well, to be honest, in 2017, right after Irma, we didn't have much complaints coming up. I guess people were more concerned about the impact that it had at that moment. But indeed, like you said, aftermath, maybe next year, when the people will come forward, when there's no real relief, that it will increase. But then, like my colleague said, we would have to, show and give the information as to the increase of the complaints and the workload being much more before we can request a change in the formation.
Government have basically heightened expectations of the people. The thing of this money reserved for government and that homes will be filled. Government itself is saying today, yeah, there are over 2,000 homes without roofs and stuff like that. So I find this a legitimate qualm or legitimate argument for a citizen X to go by the ombudsman and say, look, we were led to believe this. Nothing is happening. It's 14 months or a year after the hurricane. What about, can we look into this?
Definitely, and I would encourage the people to do that. However, before they do that, they have to let their concerns, their grievances be made known to government first. Before you can come to the ombudsman, you have to do this in writing and allow the government at least a reasonable time, which we have 30 days for them to answer. If you get no response, then you can come to the ombudsman.
Another issue playing is, I don't know if it's been reported to the ombudsman or if there have been complaints. We've been arguing backwards and forth for a number of years now. There was one case that went to court and many are still pending. 2 cases went to court by now that I know on our so-called beach policy. There's nothing that is laid down in the law. It's basically a policy. And in St. Martin, as you know, policies change just as fast as government change. But people get the impression that when they acquire waterfront property, the beach leading down to it is also their property. Those are things people were complaining about also. Have you ever had a formal complaint on that?
No, we have not. No, we have not.
But just to add, while, again, as my colleague says, the ombudsman can investigate, there are some certain exemptions that when we are not authorized to investigate. You just mentioned a general policy. That is, for example, one of the exemptions. I'm not saying that's necessarily for this particular question that it is. I'm just giving the general the outline of how the ombudsman operates. And there are certain exemptions when we are not authorized. That is when it concerns a general policy of the government, of the department, or it's relating to a general binding resolution. So those are like 2 of the exemptions when, even though you might have a complaint, if it's government is following a general policy or general binding regulations, then the ombudsman is not authorized. But of course, that needs to be looked at per individual case. So the question that you just asked, it's not necessarily whether or not the beach policy falls in that category. I'm just giving you a general answer in terms of general policies.
Okay, we have read and we've been following that there's been cooperation between what they call the national ombudsman, so the ombudsman from the Netherlands, and also in the region there are meetings with the ombudsman, international ombudsman. So what is the purpose of this meeting? How do we at the Ombudsman Bureau of St. Martin profit from these activities?
Well, the ombudsman, the outgoing ombudsman, has been president of the CAROA, which is the Caribbean Ombudsman Association. She has also been the regional president of the IOI, which is the International Ombudsman Institute. And a lot of knowledge, as you can imagine, 8 years ago, when the present ombudsman started, I mean, there's no book to tell you what the ombudsman does, really, and there's no study you can follow to become ombudsman. So a lot of what was established over the last 8 years was gained from international relations, because of course from countries that has had ombudsman bureaus or institutions for much longer. So a lot of information in terms of how the bureau is established and functions was received from institutions such as the IOI. And there are also grants. For example, after the hurricane last year, we received a grant as the Caribbean, which we used to have a infomercial. I'm sure you perhaps have seen it. It's on our website as well. It was passed on also through social media, where infomercial was created, showing what the ombudsman is and encouraging persons in the present state of disaster that the country was in at that time, to file complaints, etc. So those are two examples that what benefits we receive from being part of such international organizations.
I also had the privilege to go to a meeting that they had in Belfast. The International Ombudsman Institution organized that, where we were talking about motion investigations and sharing best practices. It is very enlightening and encouraging, and to be there with all other ombudsmen from all over the world, and everyone sharing their experience and supporting one another, how things can be done in a more better way. I also had the privilege to visit the National Ombudsman in the Netherlands and also look into their kitchen, so to speak, and learn from them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So in that way, it is very, you learn a lot with traveling and sharing information with other ombudsmen.
Let me also add on to that. With the National Ombudsman in the Netherlands, in last year, he visited the island, and together with the ombudsman had various meetings with various stakeholders. And what you were just asking about the recovery funds, and they had various meetings with various stakeholders. And after that meeting, they wrote a joint letter to our Prime Minister as well as the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, informing them of their concerns. So that is another way of the joint cooperation and working together for the general interest.
Oh, that was my next question. Looked like you're looking at my notes, but anyways. No, I know that the Ombudsman Office had a study and investigation of the emergency preparedness of the country, and also how people apply and get aid. It was not quite clear. It was not published. People, something that we have complained about on this program, people were lining up by the building, but there was no available information on procedures on how to go about it. How did that go, and can we see we hope for improvement on that since your report?
Well, our report, which is the disaster risk and reduction, which we initiated after the hurricanes last year, it did not focus on aid. It focused more on what was done directly after the disaster. And not even that so much, but we have a disaster management law and a disaster management policy. And we evaluated if it was functioning. For example, as part of the disaster management plan, all of the ESF, which is the emergency support functions, there are 10 of them. So based on the ministries, including GB, LL.M, etc., each have a specific responsibility in the aftermath of a disaster. And as part of those that disaster management plan, each of those ESF groups had to draft, or should have had, sub-plans and action plans detailing what what must be done in terms of your ESF group in the aftermath of a disaster. And what we found out was that most of those sub and action plans were never drafted. Some of them were in draft, but they were never approved. So they were not really working documents. So that is one of the what we recognize in our reporting, and one of our recommendations was, of course, that these plans had to be drafted, and there were some other certain aspects that we identified. Our reports actually are all on our website, and the disaster management plan is, of course, one of them. So if you log on to our website, www.ombudsmanxm.com, and you go to the report section, you will see the report, not only of the disaster management plan, but other reports that we have written in the past.
Another complaint, I've been living almost half of my life or more. So don't worry how old I am, but I've been a while. The so-called landfill, the dump. We know that a group of citizens has taken government to court, but we also, if you live in this country, you know of the blankets of smoke and the flare-ups and stuff like that. I don't know if there have been official complaints to the ombudsman, but these things are playing in society for a while. So how do people come when they don't get any relief? They end up by your door.
There has been one complainant, but it was not an actual complaint. As I said, you have to first inform government about your complaint, your concerns. And what we did, we advised the person to rally up other complainants and start a petition, and then we can go further to look into it. And like I said before, there were other agencies and instances that already were doing investigations on the dump, and therefore we did not do our own motion yet. However, if we would have a petition and more persons that would support this, that we can decide to still, based on those concerns, try to look into that matter on the side of the people.
There was also recently a court case that was concluded,
Initiated.
concerning the dump.
Yeah.
So that is also a reason that okay, again, as my colleague said, if you receive complaints, it's something we will look into. But there are enough instances that are looking into the issue.
You said to me a while ago that, and I'm concentrating on complaints now, that GB isn't one of the companies that fall in your scope of
Jurisdiction.
of envies, of entities, government entities. In St. Martin, the electrical service is kind of abruptly interrupted from time to time, which might be a normal thing. You work with engines. The problem with it is this: when electricity is restored, it surges at such a that it damages people's equipment, fridges and all these things in your house. But GB says, no, we're not responsible for that. Now, if we can't complain to the ombudsman on that, where do we knock?
Well, we again, let me clarify that we are not the GB does not fall under our jurisdiction. In other countries, often you will see that there's a
Yeah.
what do you call
Consumer.
consumer agency that handles issues like that. But in the past, when we receive complaints, not only, for example, GB or someone would go to a store, purchase a TV, the TV is not functioning properly. We have also received questions in that regard. We refer them to the Chamber of Commerce. So that is what we do, because again, we are not authorized to. But a consumer agency would be an entity that would handle issues like that. Unfortunately, we don't have none on St. Martin as yet.
Yeah, I saw there's one in the making, but it's not the way it needs to be. But I would rather have the Parliament make those changes to broaden the scope for
Well, you could lobby.
Well, we would like that. I know that there are some ombudsmen where they have the authority as well to call on the minister to do, and I think they also had one where they can, if they do not answer, or that they get a fine if they don't come, or if they don't answer, if they don't respond. Other countries.
A community interest project. This the Phillipsburg Jubilee Library has been in existence for 95 years. Like most other people, most other organizations here, it was seriously damaged by the hurricane. The Jubilee Library is said to have lost 50% of its inventory. That's what I get from the management. They were here a few weeks ago, and they're seeking a home. They're doing some fundraisers and stuff like that. But there's the public. They've raised about 30,000, I think. The public is doing a chip in, but nothing else is being done. There's a checkmate or something like that with government. How can the Jubilee Library or the people, the citizens who are losing this service because many people don't have internet connection, so the kids use the library for their studies. How can the people get the Ombudsman office to get involved in this situation with the Jubilee Library?
Well, in this case, we are authorized, so they can come and file a complaint. First, let your grievances be known to the government, and then you come to us after 30 days if you haven't gotten a response. And then we will investigate the complaint.
Okay, that's good, because I told them I would try to help them. I just need to get information. I think it's it's kind of hard, but everybody's hurt by the hurricane. But a lot of it, in St. Martin, when you live here, you know how things play. So that's that's what it is. Now, some people here in this country are critical of everything. Maybe they're critical of the Ombudsman too. We are very critical people. We could find reason to criticize everybody. But we have had since September 6th, the day of Irma, last year, criticism how things are done, what is done, what is not done. Anytime there was a project being done, people looked at it or compared it to what you could have done with the same money in terms of roofing. But they don't do it across the board. Certain projects are critiqued and others are not. How does an organization like the Ombudsman decide if this is a legitimate complaint or that it should be taken someplace else, so it doesn't belong here?
Well, the main thing is that it has to be a complaint against government or a government entity of which the Ombudsman has assumed authority. If it's not government, we cannot investigate it. That's not the authority of the Ombudsman, but we would advise them where to go, where they can best get their concerns be heard or addressed.
I'm thinking it's not a government entity, but government is subsidizing. So government is paying its bill. Does not give the Ombudsman authority? Is the taxpayers' money all the same? It's not an entity, but it's taxpayers' money.
It depends on which entity we're talking about. We have a list of entities that we do have authority over, which we do investigate, and they can file a complaint at the Ombudsman.
But
So, for example, you mentioned
Go
the
ahead.
library, which is one of them. It receives
Right.
subsidy. Subsidy is one of the requirements. There are certain legal requirements that we have analyzed, and based on those legal requirements, we concluded that this entity, the Ombudsman, will assume authority over, for example, the asset fee, cadastre, the library. There are certain other institutions, but at the same time, others. The discussion is still ongoing, and so we cannot conclude or we cannot assume authority, because it's one thing to say I assume authority, but if you don't get cooperation from the other side, then it doesn't make any sense. So it's what we did with the initial list of the set BOs as a public and private and public authority. We identified them. We had meetings starting in 2016 where we called them in. We gave them a presentation, had discussions, and based on those discussions, we concluded that the Ombudsman has authority. And for other institutions like GB and others, we have not had that discussion. So we cannot say that, hey, we will accept complaints from them because we simply don't have that authority to do so.
Okay, you have said that that the public needs to write letters to government or to the entity, and then in 30 days, if they don't get a response, then they check in with the ombudsman and ask the ombudsman to investigate it or help them out. What other information the public would need to know in going to the ombudsman to seek redress on issues?
Well, the most important thing is indeed it has to be a government entity, or it has to be government or government entity that we assume authority over. They have to write a letter of concern. When they come to us, we would have discussion. We have our complaint officers who will interact with them and get more details of their complaint. We will then first do an intervention. We will always start with an intervention and send an email to the department. We always start at the department level because it doesn't make sense to go to the minister first, because the department is the one that knows more about it. We would address the department and ask them to give a response to the request within a week. And if we do not get a response, then we would initiate a real investigation. We would give a notification of complaint with questions regarding the concerns or the complaint of the citizen and regarding their policies. And after that, we would make once we receive their answers, we would make a preliminary findings report with the different findings. We would give them the opportunity to give their reaction to it. And at the end, we will if it was satisfactorily handled, we will issue a notification of termination. And if it wasn't satisfactorily handled, then we would make up a final report. And actually, both of the reports will have recommendations to government regarding that particular matter.
Let me also add, because we're focusing oftentimes, which we do, of non-responses. So, for example, a citizen requests a permit, or even if they have a complaint, they write a letter and they never get a response. But that is, of course, part of what the ombudsman investigates, so we ensure that you get a response. But there are also instances which that you get a response. So you apply for whatever, a permit, or you have a tax issue, and you don't agree with the response. The ombudsman can also look into and say, hey, was the guidelines followed? Was the law followed? Was the established policy followed? And based on that, we will also make recommendations whether or not a complaint is valid. So it's not also if government didn't respond, it is also, okay, government responded, but hey, I don't understand, I don't agree. Why my neighbor got it and I didn't? What is, so in those situations, we could look at the answer of the response from government, and we can analyze whether or not it's in line with existing policy, and also investigate in that regard. So it's not only based on non-responses from government, but also responses that maybe you are not necessarily in agreement with.
We also advise them, if you're not in agreement, we would first advise them to file an objection, or they could maybe go in appeal. And sometimes they don't want to, and then we would be able to still look at, indeed, like my colleague said, was the process followed, were the guidelines followed, the way that government came to the decision.
I need two things I need to understand here. Does the ombudsman, first of all, advise people that their case should be taken to court? The first question. And the second one, when the ombudsman, in investigating something themselves, the Bureau of the Ombudsman, decide that it should go to the Constitutional Court and deal with government issues?
Okay. When it comes to advising, as I said, once they got a decision, we would advise them to file an objection, because that is their right. That is the procedure. We always follow the procedure. You can file an objection. And after that, you can also go to court, go in appeal. That is up to them if they want to go. We would give that advice, but they have to know for themselves if they want to do that. one thing that I also want to say is once they have, if there is a case, because sometimes persons have initiated a case in court, or a case is ongoing, or there has been a decision rendered with the court, and then they would still come to the ombudsman. The ombudsman is then not authorized to investigate that same matter. If it pertains to the same matter where there is already a decision on the table, the ombudsman will not be able to investigate. However, if it's pertaining to another aspect or another matter than what the decision was, then we will be able to investigate. And regarding the Constitutional Court, the ombudsman can scrutinize laws that were passed, that were ratified by Parliament and government, once they are infringing against the rights of the Constitution. If it's in friction with in violation of the rights of the people in the Constitution, then the ombudsman can decide to take that matter to the Constitutional Court.
Let me also add this, because we also there's a misconception sometimes that the ombudsman, is a legal representative. We are not. We investigate propriety, so proper, as my colleague said, behavior of government. So we are not your legal representative. You, for a citizen, for example, could come and file a complaint, and we could establish that propriety was followed, that government in this case did what they had to do. So we are not, again, a legal representative. We investigate propriety, proper behavior in the relationship between government and its citizens.
I would also like to say, because sometimes indeed they think that we are their lawyer, and they would say, hey, I want you to do this now and I want you to do that now. But the ombudsman we have our procedures that we follow. As I said, we would do an intervention, a notification of complaint, etc. But sometimes people want different things, but that is not how it operates. We follow our procedures, and oftentimes if it is not going their way, they can always go to court or go to another institution to get their redress.
Okay. We're winding down. So the ombudsman is a new thing in St. Martin. If you live in other countries, you know it's there and what it does, but it's still relatively new to the people. So what is it they need to know about the ombudsman, the Bureau of the Ombudsman, and how it can be beneficial to them and their dealings, their everyday dealings with government and government institutions?
Well, for sure, we would like the people to know what they can expect of government, how government should act towards the behavior of government towards the people. Oftentimes, it seems as if you need to beg government to do something, but that is government, it is the obligation of government. The people have chosen a parliament who appointed ministers to run the day-to-day operations on behalf of the people. And it is the right of the person, for instance, to request something and to get an answer in time. So it's about the behavior of government, that they need to know that it is not a favor that has been done, that government is doing you a favor. No, that is the duty of government towards you, the right of the citizen. And we really would like them to know that. And if that is not happening, that there is an institution, the ombudsman, who would, on your behalf, investigate your complaints.
Okay, and Mr. Duggins, anything to add? We are winding down.
No, I will just conclude again by reminding the public of the information evening at the USM next week, Wednesday, December 5th. The closure of our school ombudsman project from 7 to 9:15. Come out and hear the 4 public high schools compete and giving a presentation of what they have learned over the past months of the institution of the ombudsman. It will be informative, and I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Okay, I would like to thank you for coming in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking to Ms. Gwendolien MOSSEL, the incoming ombudsman, and also the Secretary General, Mr. Duggins, we appreciate you on the show. We want to wish you much luck going forward. And do come out and listen to the information evening on Wednesday upcoming and hear proposals from future Ombudsman and Ombudsman Bureau of St. Martin. We thank you very much for listening in, for looking. Thank you for participating. This has been The Morning Show with Elton Jones. Do have a pleasant day further. Goodbye.